Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Maria, and good day, everyone. I regret my inability to share my thoughts live and in person. The live part was precluded by a completely inflexible scheduling conflict on my end, and the in-person part has been forestalled by COVID. Having said that, I know and admire how much thought and effort Carlos Espinal and his colleagues put into this global health conference. In years past, the conference has always been an intellectual highlight of my year. And so I'm happy to adapt as needed and make the best of the opportunity that Carlos et al. Have generously given me to share some thoughts with you. My objective here is to inform and stimulate public and private discourse on vaccines, which I will take to encompass vaccines for COVID-19, as well as vaccines for other pathogens. And I'll pursue that objective initially by viewing the experience of COVID-19 vaccine development and manufacture through a health economics lens. I'll also speculate on the ways our COVID-19 experience is likely to change our approach to vaccine development, as well as the strategies we adopt and the tools we use to take proper account of the full value of vaccines and vaccination. Very briefly, I plan to make 3 observations. My first observation has to do with the incredible pace at which COVID-19 vaccine development and manufacture have proceeded. My second observation is that the unprecedented pace of our progress may be accounted for by A, the sizable magnitude of the resources being devoted to the challenge of addressing COVID-19, and B, the innovative ways in which we're using those resources. And the innovations I'll touch upon have to do with vaccinology innovation, process innovation, and innovative forms of stakeholder cooperation. And my third observation is that these COVID-19 vaccine developments may reasonably be expected to yield sizable benefits in addressing the current pandemic, in diminishing vaccine coverage gaps involving known vaccine preventable diseases, and in heading off future outbreaks involving other dangerous pathogens that lurk ahead. Before I proceed, I do want to note that my comments reflect the efforts, the collective efforts of a super hardworking and very talented set of close colleagues with whom I've been actively pursuing many of the ideas I'll convey. These include Daniel Cadaret, Madalena Ferrana, Randy Heyer, JP Sevilla, and Daniel Tortorice. I'll move on now to my core content. And my first point is very straightforward. It has to do with the pace of COVID-19 vaccine development. The dominant fact here is that never before in history have we witnessed such rapid vaccine development. Vaccine development typically takes 10 to 15 years, with the 5 years it took to develop the mumps vaccine representing the current speed record. By contrast, within 1.5 years of the discovery of COVID-19, there will plausibly be development, approval, and distribution in the US, the UK, and various other high-income countries of 1 or more COVID-19 vaccines, and on a widespread basis that's not limited to several million healthcare providers. And by the end of 2023, we might expect to see a similar coverage achievement extended widely to many low and middle-income countries. The rapid progress on vaccine development reflects the fact that the first COVID-19 vaccine candidate was announced just 10 weeks after publication of the genetic sequence of COVID-19, which took place just 6 weeks after the first COVID-19 patient identified in Wuhan, China, showed symptoms of illness. There are at least 10 COVID vaccine trackers online, and I'm not sure I fully appreciate the differences among them. However, the tracker developed and managed by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine appears to be at least as complete as the others. And according to the update provided on October 5th, which was just prior to the start of this conference, there are about 200 candidate vaccines in preclinical phases and 49 in clinical phases, with 9 already having reached phase 3 and 1 in a combined phase 2, phase 3, that being the BioNTech, Fosun Pharma, Pfizer mRNA candidate vaccine. Let me now turn to my second point, which is about as straightforward as the first. The second point is that the pace at which progress is occurring here reflects both the amount of resources being devoted to the problem and also the innovative ways in which those resources are being used. Admittedly, the evidence and reports I've seen are a bit confusing and sometimes mildly contradictory. But to the best of my knowledge, more funding has already been dedicated to COVID-19 vaccine development and manufacture than to any prior vaccine in history. That's because as much as 80% of the global population could contract COVID-19 over several years in the absence of biomedical intervention. And among biomedical interventions, vaccination ranks near the top among likely ways to rein in the pandemic and its concomitant and overwhelming health, social, and economic burdens. National governments, international nonprofits such as CEPI, major donors such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and private industry have already poured upwards of $7 billion into vaccine research and development. Some governments and nonprofits have additionally entered into advanced purchase agreements with pharmaceutical companies for well above $10 billion more. These numbers of billions actually pale in comparison to estimates of the 2020 GDP costs of COVID. $700 billion in the US and $4,000 billion globally. That would be $4 trillion globally. But these numbers of billions that we're spending on COVID vaccine development and manufacture do loom extremely large in relation to inflation-adjusted historical spending levels on the development of vaccines for other pathogens. In addition to the unprecedented level of resources being directed to the development of COVID vaccines, the pace of vaccine development also reflects the innovative ways in which private and social resources are being used. Among the most important set of innovations are those having to do with the use of cutting-edge technical approaches to vaccine development. These range from the relatively novel, non-replicating and replicating viral vector vaccines to mRNA vaccines that have yet to be approved for medical use. Process innovations are also proving exceedingly important. In non-pandemic times, the development of a vaccine, from basic research to clinical trials, manufacturing, and distribution, follows a linear sequence of steps. Developers use the success of each phase to justify the investment and risk in the next phase. But COVID-19 vaccine development is blazing a completely new trail here, with many development phases executed in parallel rather than sequentially. For example, some developers have combined clinical trial phases or started subsequent clinical phases before confirming the success of their previous trials. As another example, vaccine development is also taking place in parallel with the standing up or repurposing of infrastructure that's suitable for the high quality, high throughput manufacture of vaccines or the fill and finish of vials and ampules. The US government is leading this type of process innovation through Operation Warp Speed. This particular effort has already committed over $10 billion in direct funding to support 6 promising candidate vaccines, including not only funding for clinical trials, but also for manufacturing and distribution. In addition to technical and process innovation, the COVID-19 vaccine process has also been accelerated by significant new forms of national, international, and public-private collaboration. An example here would be ACTIV, ACTIV, which is an acronym for the Accelerating COVID-19 Therapeutic Interventions and Vaccine Partnership, led by the NIH and other US agencies, by the European Medicines Agency, EMA, and by representatives from academia, philanthropic organizations, and pharmaceutical companies. The main goal of ACTIV is to develop a collaborative framework for prioritizing vaccine and drug candidates, for streamlining clinical trials, coordinating regulatory processes, avoiding duplication of effort, and leveraging knowledge and other assets. COVID-19 vaccine development has also been greatly facilitated by cooperative private arrangements for the sharing and licensing of vaccine technologies, clinical development capacity, vaccine production techniques and facilities, and experienced human resources. As an example here, I'm thinking of some companies producing and selling adjuvants for incorporation into the COVID-19 vaccines being developed by other companies. As another example, innovative financial mechanisms have been developed and used to lower the risk to private companies of investing in the development and manufacture of a COVID-19 vaccine. Think here of guaranteed purchases under, again, Operation Warp Speed, which transfer the risk of vaccine failure from vaccine manufacturers to the public. AMCs, Advanced Market Commitments, for a COVID-19 vaccine are another example, and one that in general distributes risk between a public entity and a private vaccine developer or producer. For example, the AMC created by the European Commission is a legally binding contract whereby the EC agrees to purchase a quantity of vaccine doses at a pre-specified price before production takes place if the vaccine meets a given standard. As such, it reduces the risk that a vaccine producer will not find a market for its product. However, the producer retains the risk that it will not produce a vaccine that meets the standard. Prominent in the AMC domain, we have COVAX, an AMC designed to achieve equitable access to a COVID vaccine. COVAX is led by CEPI, Gavi, and the WHO. Now, most Gavi initiatives rely on the altruism of wealthy countries. By contrast, COVAX aims to attract high-income country support by offering high-income countries access to a COVID vaccine at a better price than they could otherwise obtain. It's been a bit slow out of the blocks, but COVAX does bear keeping our eyes trained on. Let me now turn to the third and final point I wish to make, and that is that if COVID has a silver lining at all, and I understand that's a big if, but if it does, it likely involves the implications of the pandemic for the structure and operation of immunization ecosystems and also for global understanding of the value of vaccination. Here, I would highlight the resoundingly compelling evidence offered by the pandemic in support of three interconnected claims that have been circulating in the global health community for at least 15 years. Claim A, vaccines are generally undervalued by society and often appreciably so. Claim B, such undervaluation is very much to our individual and collective peril with respect to the optimal allocation of social resources. And claim C, the problem of undervaluation can be surmounted by adopting a broad approach to health technology assessment, essentially changing from a narrow health-centric perspective to a more expansive societal perspective. These claims A, B, and C, have neither been widely accepted or rejected. But COVID may change that insofar as the range and intensity of health, social, and economic losses suffered during the COVID pandemic highlight the benefits to be gained from preventing COVID-19 in particular, and simultaneously shedding light on the benefits to be gained from preventing infectious disease more generally. Along these lines, COVID-19 is raising awareness of and could help lay to rest a long list of scientific, policy, and economic disputes about the value of vaccination. The list includes disputes about indirect protection of vaccination involving the promotion of herd protection. Herd protection has now become a household term. The list includes the value of vaccines in reducing the risk of nosocomial infection during inpatient stays, something I think we all now understand. It includes debates about the value of vaccination in promoting school attendance, educational attainment, and cognitive function. Just think of the interruption of routine vaccination programs and the implications for people having to stay home from school because of lockdowns and other mitigation policies. It includes differences of opinion as to the economic benefits of vaccination associated with increased labor supply, hours worked, productivity, and income, which is being impeded by the pandemic. We're talking here about the value of vaccines in reducing anxiety and promoting peace of mind. And we're talking about arguments about the contribution of vaccination to social equity achieved via the protection of marginalized groups that are so often at heightened risk of infection and poor disease outcomes, and are liable to suffer disproportionately from the economic consequences of infectious disease, including any mitigation strategies, as I've just noted. In short, COVID-19 is poised to blaze a new path for vaccines that will enable them to make a greatly elevated contribution to health and well-being. I'm going to close now, and I'm going to close by saying that I believe the world is facing a global opportunity to draw out lessons from our COVID-19 experience that we can fruitfully hardwire into our social consciousness and related public and private decisions. In particular, we are learning and relearning the old adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure when it comes to human health. And we're learning that we must stop undervaluing vaccines by facing up to and acting on the evidence that the full economic and social vaccines is many times larger, perhaps 2 to 6 times larger, than their narrow health-centric benefits that are too often all we study in making vaccine development, recommendation, and reimbursement decisions. In American football, we sometimes talk about what's called a 2-minute drill. That's a reference to the hurry-up offense we often see as the team with the lower score nears the end of a game. And that's essentially what the world is running now as we urgently try to catch up and knock down the pandemic. In the process of conducting that drill, we've opened the floodgates on funding and devised many innovative physical and process technologies and cooperative arrangements. These innovations are very promising with respect to dealing with the epic public health crisis that we're currently facing. But please keep in mind that they also offer us strategies and tools for preventing and responding to numerous as yet unidentified pathogens in our future, what we might call statistical pathogens. We must take advantage of these new strategies and tools to ensure that the standard vaccine development pattern of panic, neglect, finally falls by the wayside. That's what many of us in the global health community would like to see, as COVID-19 provides irrefutable proof of the colossal benefits of sustained and large-scale commitments to vaccine development. Above all, we would do well to draw on the lessons of COVID-19 and not become yet another poster child for the old proverb, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm unable to be with you, but I appreciate your giving me this opportunity. Again, thank you.